So I know we uploaded videos throughout the weekend, but I'm gonna be honest, it's been multiple days for me personally to sit behind this microphone and talk to you. So we do have a bit of catching up to do, if you couldn't already tell by the topics that we had described in the past few days worth of the show. I know, I kind of take it as a point of pride that I haven't missed uploading a video on a day since I think sometime in late 2019. It's been 5 years straight of uploading at least one video a day. But in this video, we have to talk about the Montreal Canadiens. Now I know, yesterday's content was a little bit contradictory, but also at the same time, spot on, dead accurate. Because if you click on yesterday's video, you would have seen a commentary talking about how the Montreal Canadiens' biggest problem isn't necessarily that their goaltending is inconsistent or that some of the guys that we thought would be middle six scorers have not been middle six scorers, and how the defense has been there and how the guys have been injured. The biggest problem we had talked about in the video yesterday was that the Montreal Canadiens are kind of boring. In the games where they lose, they absolutely stink. And in the games where they win, they barely squeak out that win. And quite frankly, up until yesterday, they hadn't won in a while. So it was getting very disheartening for Canadiens fans to watch the team. Lo and behold, in a video commentary where we talk about how the Canadiens are playing uninspiring and boring hockey, that same morning, they go out there and stomp the Buffalo Sabres with a huge 7-5 victory. Now, sure, 7-5 victory. Great to see the Canadiens guys getting up on the board. Their 4-point night out of Suzuki, 3-point night out of Slavkovsky, 2-goal night for Caulfield, and Lane Hudson had himself 2 assists as well. But at the same time, you have to recognize that this game was 3-2 Buffalo at one point. Then it was 5-4 Buffalo in the third period. Montreal still had some of the same problems that we have seen plaguing their gameplay in this game. In particular, Cayden Primo, wowzers, he was bad. Anyways, besides all of the conversation about yesterday's Sabres game, I wanted to talk about a little bit of a warning that was sent out by Elliot Friedman on the latest 32 Thoughts podcast about the Montreal Canadiens. What we're going to be doing is transcribing some of the quotes that he had on the recent episode of the show, because they pretty much illuminate his main thought process when thinking about the Canadiens as a destination right now, and where this treacherous path could take Kent Hughes if he is not careful. Let's go over onto this article published on HabsFanatics.com by Elias Adam. Elliot Friedman warns Kent Hughes and the Canadiens to avoid a rushed trade for a short-term fix. In this article is a clip of Elliot Friedman talking about the Canadiens on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and there also is this quote right here. Montreal is in a dangerous zone where any recruitment error could have a lasting impact on the team's rebuilding process. Furthermore, we had this piece published on awinningshabit.com by Nate Duffett that goes out there and describes even more of Friedman's thoughts. Plenty of Elliot's takes have been sitting well with the Habs faithful, but on one of his recent episodes, he discussed how the Canadiens are not a destination. Cities being a destination has come up over in recent years. The premise is that some cities get an advantage in free agency because of their player-friendly lifestyle. There are many reasons why a city could be a destination. The provincial, state, and federal income tax could also be a factor, as could the pressure from the fan base, the weather, or the quality of the team. When looking at these factors, it makes sense why Friedman may reach the destination conclusion that Montreal is not there right now. This is essentially what he talks about in the podcast. 1. The Montreal Canadiens do not have a favorable state income tax thanks to the Quebec and Canadian laws. 2. It's fun to play in Montreal's environment, but it can be a pressure cooker when things are going wrong, like right now. 3. Montreal is a beautiful city to play in, but the winters can be rough if you'd prefer to play in a warmer city. And number 4, Montreal's roster is a dumpster fire right now. They can't defend, and their offense isn't clicking. At least until yesterday. It'll be good in a few years, but finding players to help them out right now is difficult. And so for the reasons above, Elliot Friedman spoke about how the Habs are not really a destination right now, and how if Kent Hughes were to make some sort of a panic trade, it could be a very dangerous mistake if things go even the slightest bit wrong. This is a warning that I actually do think makes a lot of sense, and I think Canadiens fans have it probably in their best interest to fully absorb and think about, because hey, Montreal and Kent Hughes can toss all the assets they want at a player to add onto the squad, a middle six center or a top four right-handed defenseman, anybody else that's available on the market. The Montreal Canadiens could probably try to enter those sweepstakes, but the question is that really going to help them out, and by how much? If there is some sort of a trade that is done and the guy acquired isn't all he lives up to be, or he doesn't live up to the contract, or even if he becomes a little bit overpaid, it could totally hurt the Canadiens in the same way contracts like Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher's have had so far. No disrespect intended to my guy Gally, he has been fantastic this season, oddly enough. But let's go over to another tweet published by the Habs on Reddit Twitter account. It's even more comments from Friedman on the recent 32 Thoughts. If you're a Canadiens fan, you might not like what I'm going to say, but right now you have to hurt for James Higgins. The one thing you're seeing now is that Coach Marty and the players are in a great mood in the morning, and after the game they look so defeated. That's a really tough place to be at the beginning of November. The Canadiens are not one big trade away. I would have a conversation about, are we really sure that the way we're playing or the way we're doing things is helping the players enough? Next year, you could have a high pick coming, you could have Ivan Demidov coming, and all of a sudden things could start to look a little rosier. It's really hard to rebuild in this league. So for Elliotte Friedman to heed this warning to the Canadiens, not to essentially make a panic trade, not to go out there and shell some significant assets for a guy that might be overpaid and a little bit older, this is a worthwhile thought process to think about, I would say. The Montreal Canadiens were not supposed to be good this season. There was supposed to be some hope, but when you consider the lacking performance in general of the team, it becomes a lot easier to absorb that idea that a rebuild is not supposed to take 3 years. It's supposed to take maybe 4 or 5 or 6. We had already made a few commentaries talking about that same process, and especially with the goaltending, but that's concerned. I mean, you think about Cayden Primo and Sam Montembeault, they've both been pretty bad in general this season, especially Primo, so you even have to think about it like that. Like, if you wanted to make a trade for a top 4 defenseman or a top center, are you still going to be able to compete? With this goaltending tandem at your disposal, does it matter who you bring in? Could you bring in Sidney Crosby and still be bad? There are a bunch of ideas that I think you should internalize if you're thinking about the Montreal Canadiens and where to go from here. Obviously, riding the wave is a lot easier to talk about today than it was 2 days ago because they just came off of a great super hot victory. But at the same time, play like that, as sloppy as it was yesterday against Buffalo, as terrible as the goaltending as it was yesterday against Buffalo, at the end of the day, I guess Habs fans are going to be satisfied with the game because they were entertained. It was a very fun, very high-paced, high-flare, high-flash kind of game. Lane Hudson was torching guys on defense, and I literally mean torching guys. He was going out there making Rasmus Dahlin look like a fool out of all people. But I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Firstly, about the Canadiens and the Sabres game yesterday. That's obviously going to be a hot topic. But also, what do you think about this warning from Friedman? Don't just make a trade to make a trade. Actually evaluate if the player acquired is worth the risk, is worth the dollar amounts, and is actually going to be able to help this team go throughout their path of potentially winning games and maybe even doing so into the next few years. The last thing I think the Montreal Canadiens fans would want to see this team do is acquire a guy that would help them win maybe 5 or 6 games this season. 5 to 6 games is a lot of games, but if you end up getting an extra 10 to 12 points this year, you miss out on a first overall James Higgins because of it. Let's say the player you acquire then fizzles out quickly because he's maybe in his second half of the 20s or whatever, then all of a sudden things look terrible and you're looking at trades like the Josh Anderson trade. Oh, you traded away Domi, you got this Anderson guy signed into a big money deal, and now he's a bum. Like, if you just stuck around with it, you try to become a little bit worse, you try to do some other things, maybe you have some more versatility and projectability into the long-term future. But for now, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are the options for the Canadiens, and what do you think about Friedman's thought process here? Quick disclaimer though, the very next video on this channel is going to completely diminish any sort of an idea or a narrative that we discussed here in this video. This video is all about talking about how it's kind of dangerous for the Canadiens to make a panic trade or to make a trade for an aging asset. Guess what we're going to do in the next video? We're going to talk about aging assets that the Montreal Canadiens could go out there and potentially trade for. So stay around onto the channel for that. It's a really interesting update regarding another team in the Eastern Conference. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.